has to own it. Like if they're the person who committed adultery. With that being said, the person may be able to point to some things that um, they felt like were contributing factors. I mean, I don't want to go down the line and lay out excuses, but you can, oh, whatever you feel your spouse was doing or not doing to make you feel um, like that was a contributing factor to you cheating or whatever. But at the end of the day, I believe that a person who cheats has to accept responsibility that they broke God's law and they broke God's command, and then they also need to apologize because like the thought process that I take now is that like right now I don't not cheat because um, I don't want to let Kelly down. Like that's not my primary number one. That's on there, but my number one is God, and then two, like that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. And so those are my primary reasons. That's so then it's independent of if we're having a bad time in our marriage or we're arguing or she does something, she offends me, whatever. I have a standard with God and my own identity that's independent of her so that I can be who God's calling me to be. Then my love, then my desire to be a good husband to her and keep her trust. That's another layer of it. So there's like three different things I got to get through, and so that's my perspective on the responsibility. And I think we wanted to dig a little deeper into the at fault because I think there's some unspoken possible language being said there.
Yeah, and also I just want to mention that we didn't have a lot of information in this comment, but so I'm going a little bit off of like I'm just assuming what was really going on under this question, and a lot of times when you see infidelity in a marriage, there's like typically like two stances people would take. Either like the person who cheated is just completely dead wrong and they need to be doing anything in their power to make amends, make things right. And the other spouse is just kind of like, like just kind of off the hook and just kind of like, hey, like, I need you to make this up to me because you let me down hugely. Or there's this idea that, well, two people, it takes two, right, to break a marriage. And so this idea that the reason why that person cheated, even though it was a wrong act on their part, is because their spouse did something. And while that could be the case, there can be instances where there's other things going on in the marriage that maybe sets the table for adultery. I think I agree with what Torres is saying, which is that the act itself is something that is wrong, and we all remember growing up hearing that two wrongs don't make it right. So even in a situation where someone is doing something that maybe opened the door for those circumstances to happen, or certain wounds or certain things, it doesn't necessarily it doesn't let the other person off the hook for them responding to that in sin, right? And so that's why we really want to dig deeper into this, because honestly we have to sit with this for a little bit, because we have to kind of go back go back to that space to be able to respond. But now we want to bring you all a little bit forward and really talk about some little bit deeper perspective shifts that I think would really be helpful, which Torres is alluding to, which is this whole area of fault and blame when it comes to marriage.
Yeah.
So we know that people's actions, while impacting each other, are also independent in that each person has to make a choice and make a decision how they're responding to their spouse or how they're upholding their marriage vows. But
yeah, I think, and again, I just want to reiterate, like the comment, we don't know all the details, and really, I don't feel like we're assuming what the person who left the comment necessarily is thinking, but we from talking to people and from knowing ourselves, we're just addressing this on a general sense that one of the things that we think happens when we get into whose fault is it, is more of you can fall into a victim perspective, like if you're the person that was not cheated on or was cheated on, it's your fault, like Kelly said, you owe me everything and this and that, and that's not quite conducive to an atmosphere of healing and working together to, if that's what God is calling you to, if that's what you are trying to fight for your marriage, which is what our YouTube channel about is. You can't be having this victim perspective or this perspective that like the person has to carry all the workload, right? And really what comes to mind is, sometimes a person is not in a proper place if they've done something done something wrong. They may need to be covered in prayer. They may need to be strengthened. They may need to be encouraged. They may need you, even though they're the person who did something wrong, that you may need to go into a spiritual covering of that person and like have their back. And if you kind of have a perspective that like, no, it's your fault, you make it all up, then they're in a fight all by themselves when they're already struggling to kind of get themselves back right with God to be able to even be back right with the spouse. I hope that kind of was,
Yeah, and I think I'm going to track it all the way back to our experience. I think we can speak from that place. But, back when we were first dealing with infidelity in our marriage, I remember feeling like I did want the marriage still. I wanted what I thought the marriage could be, or where I wanted it to be. But in the midst of the chaos of everything, when you're dealing with that level of hurt, you're dealing with that level of betrayal, then it is very easy to feel like, one, if I forgive or if I decide to move forward, then me, quote unquote, moving on is like letting this other person off the hook, so to speak, or I'm condoning what this person has done. I remember feeling like the only thing I could visualize was like that I had like this bank account, right? And that Torres was like had to keep depositing into this account, to like prove to me that he loved me, or prove to me that he was sorry. And like once this account, so to speak, was full, then I could finally forgive, then we could move on. But the problem was every time he was depositing into it, I was just like, no, like it's not enough. It's never going to be up. And the truth of the matter is, what you're hoping for is that somebody's going to make up for something that they really can't make up for. You know what I mean? Like there's no real like payback or like I'm going to compensate you, restitution, not in a tangible sense, right? Of like, okay, I'm going to do this thing and everything's going to be okay. I'm going to give you a makeup bag, so to speak, and like everything's going to be good. Like, no, because we're dealing with matters of the heart and the soul and the spirit, right? And so when we kind of take our mind away from hoping to find, holding on to fault so that we can get something back or get that person to do something or be something that we want them to be, then I think that's like the first steps to kind of getting freedom from the travesty of what it is that you're dealing with. And then from that point, I believe that each person in the marriage, even though one person is the one who committed adultery, each person needs to go through healing and needs to go through deliverance and needs to really commit themselves to reconnecting with God or connecting deeper with God if you already are. And I wholeheartedly believe that through that process of healing and deliverance, that God will reveal areas, even if you were the one who was cheated on, that God will reveal areas of growth and areas of deliverance, areas where you can heal, so that you can truly be whole. Because what you don't want is to be at the expense of someone else, even if it's your spouse. You don't want to be your the fruits of the spirit are things that only can come from God, like joy and your peace, and your love, all those things, to be at the expense of another person. You want to really be able to commit and connect with God so that He can be the source of those things. And so when we shift away a little bit from like from the blaming and the fault finding, then we can we have a little bit more power over our situation, in that we know that the God of the universe ultimately has control over our situation, not our spouse.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, a person has responsibility to God not to commit adultery. So they're responsible. They must own that. They must be accountable to that. With that being said, I think self-righteousness is a dangerous thing that we don't want to fall into, even if you have been offended, even if you're the one that's been cheated on. And what I mean by that is, sometimes we can get to a place where we're looking at what somebody did so bad, and where, you know, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. And rightfully so, I guess they have their own responsibility. But if you do that so much, you can miss areas where God is trying to show you where you can grow at, or God is trying to teach you a deeper level of forgiveness, or because when we take it off us looking at each other and we go vertical, God, how is God treating us? How is God when we mess up? Because we all messed up. It's all our fault that Jesus was on the cross. And so, but God is being merciful. He's being forgiving. God is showing us the image of how we are to respond to people's sins. And so, if you are so focused on what the other person did wrong and not connecting with God to figure out how you can respond to the situation and get His nature, get His character, get His spirit to guide you in that, self-righteousness can mess that can get in the way of that, and it can really you can miss the blessing God is trying to do in your life and in the marriage, and so I think that accepting responsibility is one thing, but we never want to get to the blame game where we don't recognize that we commit sins too, or like we do things, even if the sins you commit, God isn't like, oh, because you committed this sin, now I'm gonna have your spouse cheat on you. No, not necessarily in that regard, but never believe that if you go and sit with God and spend time with God, God may reveal some things in you that He wants to work on. That while you're trying to forgive, like, man, God, I can't forgive like you. He may reveal some reasons why not. God, I'm trying to pray for this person, cover this person, but I'm so angry and this and that. And so there's things that God will be showing you in the midst too, and that doesn't give the other person out. They need to be working on them too. And so it's really just trying to answer the question from a accountability standpoint, but also we want to read between the lines and make sure we're not promoting self-righteousness or any toxic type of thinking that we know is not productive in healing and fighting for your marriage.
Yeah, and also I think that a lot of times in these situations, people are looking for answers. You want to know why something happened or how do we get to this point. Those are kind of like common questions, I'm guessing, because those are the questions that I had. And when we got into this space initially, eventually I got to this point where God, I was like, God, like, why have you forsaken me? Like, where are you in this situation? Like, where are you in all these things that I wanted, marriage, having children, X, Y, and Z. And I think essentially that was my way of asking, like, how did we get here, God? Like what's going on? And I think that is also could be part of this person's question of whose fault is it? They're trying to figure out, like, why is this happening? Is this something I did? Is this something they did? Like, and again, we're always going to be pointing people back to Christ, back to really finding answers with Him. And that's going to mean slowing down. That's going to mean not getting the instant gratification of having a conversation with your spouse necessarily, trying to get answers, snooping through stuff. Like, it's gonna mean like really like sitting still and committing to spending time with God and healing with God, and through that, He can reveal how you got to that situation, and whether there's some areas that need to be healed, and God definitely revealed those things to me through my process of healing, where it got to the point where it was like, even if our marriage didn't succeed, God had blessed me so much in the area of healing, bringing me back from depression and suicidal thoughts and things like that. And it's a really dark place in my life, to being restored in Him. Being just recommitted and reconnected to Him, being able to be healed through Him, so that I could really enjoy my marriage, enjoy my children, and by really us each taking that time to really connect back with God. Torres went through his journey of really connecting with God in terms of lust, in terms of some of the things that he was struggling with. And I mean, we really got to give God all the credit for what happened in our marriage, because it was when we took our hands off, kind of, and like really being forceful in our marriage into focusing on our personal spiritual development, that we began to see shifts and change in our marriage. And we, because we were getting back close to connected with God and able to hear Him and be able to be led by the Holy Spirit, then when we're having conversations, we're each being led on Holy Spirit on when to respond and when not to respond, or you need to forgive. We're both in a more humble space at that point, because not that we're perfect, but I'm just saying, like, we had gotten a little bit more humility in that when we're having disagreements, the same humility that would allow us to work through the infidelity can help us to work through a disagreement on anything else, where it's like, okay, let me examine myself in this situation. You know what I mean? Let me examine how I'm coming off. Let me give him the benefit of the doubt. Let me trust God in this situation, even if I don't see what my spouse is doing.
Yeah, and this is, and it's on topic, but I was just sitting here and I felt like Holy Spirit wanted me to address, you know, like some of the thought process I was in, you know, like, you know, when I had an affair, I remember, you know, never blaming Kelly. I remember just like kind of saying it's me. But I also remember not really being in a real healthy place to be able to, you know, be that person that's like, oh, it's my fault. Like, I'll do whatever I can, you know. Like, I was just kind of like in shock of, like, you know, the full cesspool that I kind of had created, and just really looking at myself and like the level of shame and condemnation, you know what I mean, like I was going through. I think that although a person is 100% wrong, and I'll just speak for me, like it's difficult. It was difficult for me to fully always own that, and I never would blame Kelly, and I know sometimes people do feel that it's the other person. Like I already stated, that I believe you got accountability to God when it comes to adultery, but I understand that people feel like there's some contributing factors of why they do what they do. But like, I would never blame her, but I also, you know, to sit with yourself and fully own it and fully just like let all of that come on you is very difficult, you know. And I think that maybe if you're a spouse and you're the person that's that was cheated on, you kind of looking at this person that's cheating, you kind of feeling like you're entitled to a more you know, effort or apology, or you know, I don't know what, even remorse. I don't know. It may not be that the person does not understand the level of remorse, or you know, that they should have, or you know, they may apologize, but to fully embrace the magnitude of what you've done, it may be heavy for them. It was heavy for me, and I think if a person isn't, you know, sitting with God, and I'm trying to articulate, if a person isn't sitting with God and really like the gospel of Jesus Christ being the thing that's lifting them up out of that place, you know what I mean? Like they may not be able to even go there, because they don't have any way back up, you know. And so the idol of self, you know, your own, I'm a good person, that thought process that, you know, the world tries to put on it, that thing start getting crushed when you do something like that. And so you're trying to hang on to the I'm a good person, you're trying to find the redeeming qualities, you're trying to make an excuse for yourself, because not because you want to blame the person so much, but because like the full wrath of I'm a bad person is crushing. But that does need to happen. But a person that's not fully grasping the gospel, or not in a place where they can receive the full love and forgiveness of God, so they can just go ahead and admit like, oh man, I'm not good, and get the God, I love you anyway, and God, like God's gonna redeem you and make you better. Like, if they're not able to get to that part of it, then they may be ducking and dodging the level of heaviness that comes from the magnitude of their failure and their sin. And people don't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with it. And so until I couldn't, even though I wasn't blaming her, I still couldn't really always accept and be there for her like that, because man, I was just in a real dark, heavy place. And so I just wanted to try to bring some type of like I wrote a book called Man Code that I think go check it out, it's on Amazon, but it really talks kind of about like the psyche the psyche of kind of perspective. And one of the things when I was writing it, I wrote it for men. I thought it was good for men, but I also saw women being able to, maybe get a little understanding of what's going on in the psyche, and it's not always just, oh, dog, or it's so deeper than just like even just like sexual drive, or just love of sex, or it's very deep, and it's a we talk about root issues in the book. We talk about trauma. We talk about pride. We talk about different things that really contribute this thing, and a person may not even know all the things that's contributing, and so they may be looking at a superficial or surface level thing that their spouse did, and it's not just men, women too, whatever, and saying like, you didn't do this, or you didn't, and that's because they may have felt that, but they don't even know it's really a deeper root there. There's,
Yeah, and I was gonna say, you talked about basically how the person who commits adultery couldn't fall into blame a little bit in their attempt to kind of like try to maintain some sense of like quote unquote goodness. And I just want to add to that I think that blaming and fault finding is something that each person needs to be aware of, in their marriage, and that is I believe, a foothold or an area that can leave you susceptible. And when I really trace back, after being out of that, kind of like crazy space, when I really look back with a more objective viewpoint, I had a propensity to kind of blame you in general. Like, if I'm having a bad day, it's his fault. I'm home with the kids, I'm stay-at-home mom now, it's your fault. Like, I'm not happy with the way my life is going or how I see my future going, it was his fault. Like, you know what I mean? And so then you have this thing that truly is like, oh wow, like, I can't believe you did that. Then it just sets into motion like this deeper level of that. And like you even said, like, some self-righteousness can come in there, and it's like, I knew like everything that was wrong with my life was your fault, but it's like, that's not healthy. That's not healthy.
Right.
In a marriage, and especially one that you are trying to work on and that you're committed to fighting for. And I think what Torres said in the very beginning, you have to really sit with God and make a decision about if you're gonna fight for this marriage, if that's what God is calling you to do. And if He is calling you to do that, then there are resources, there are tools out there. That's why we do this YouTube channel, just to share from our experiences, just to encourage you, and just maybe relate to something that you may be going through, but also to see some hope in there that when you're fighting a fight that God is putting you in, like He's gonna win that battle.
Yeah, and just encourage you, like, I was the person who committed adultery, and I admitted it, but I think that the hope is, like, I was not, like, we didn't have this like clean, organized process where it was just like, nah, like, it was a journey, and like I had to do a lot of soul searching with God, and but man, God really did a complete transformation. And so there's hope, but it just takes a lot of prayer, and it takes a lot of, and if you have someone who committed adultery and they're not, like me, I kind of went into like personal development mode with God and things like that. But if you have somebody who's maybe not doing that, that person really need to be covered in prayer and need to really be, which is hard if you've been hurt, but you need to like kind of step outside and figure out like what's going on behind the scenes from a spiritual place, so you can start trying to cover that person if God is leading you to continue to fight for your marriage and be in your marriage. We know that adultery is one of those things that can end the marriage, and a person can be like, okay, I'm gone, but that's a rule, so to speak. If you sit with the Holy Spirit and say, this is what happened, I surrender, how you want me to go about this, like then you get like a testimony like ours, or there's other people out there who's overcame this, and not just like pushed it on the rug and kept it moving, but like truly healed
And you don't always know what your spouse is doing. You know what I mean? You don't always know that they're on that journey. I know early on when we first started off, after finding out about, the first uh, instance of adultery, I was getting bugs and like, oh, let's go to counseling and things like that. And from my perspective, it didn't look like he was really trying, like at least trying in our marriage. You know what I mean? It didn't look like much had changed. Hence, I'm like, no, you need to pay more. But when I let go of it, when I really let go of it and went to God with it, and it's so crazy because like I was like, I don't really remember like praying super hard for our marriage or X, Y, and Z. But Torres, he found like a year or so ago, he found like these prayers that I had posted, and when he read them back, it was like, wow, like God is, he's just a promise keeper. Like he's a promise keeper. He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Um, and today I'm confident because, you know, I'm blessed that Torres is submitted to the Holy Spirit. Like he said that this journey that he's on is not first for me. It's not to serve me. It's not like how can I just be pure for my wife, but he has accountability to God. Ultimately that's what you want, and we can go even deeper into that because I had to let go of like I need to be the number one spot, and like what I mean. Like there's so many things that get revealed during that time when you really when you really hit rock bottom and you like, oh man, God, I thought I was good and I thought everything, thought I was, killing it. I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to do. How did I get in this situation? When you start asking those questions, God, He'll start revealing some areas like, oh, you really want to know? You really, ready to, walk with me and to give your life to me and to truly be like a living sacrifice? And then you're like, oh snap, like I didn't realize it was so much stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But just and I'll just say like, man, I think, and I don't know this person's heart of why the fault, but I know what really came to my mind of if when people are doing the whose fault of the blame game is that like, and we've probably said it a couple times, it's like, man, you don't want to not sit with God in this and really like get what God has for you in every situation, like whether we perceive it to be the worst or the best situation, like God can do miracles. Like He can do amazing things that like we never would have imagined. Out of ashes we get beauty, out of mourning we get joy, and so it's so many opportunities that because of our anger or our hurt or our self-righteousness, whatever it may be, and these are human things that like we feel. Let's not to condemn anybody for feeling that, but when we can't push them to the side and really sit with God, like, man, in some of the brokenest moments, some of the worst moments is where God pours out grace like we never would even saw. And so sometimes, a lot of times, I would say, I want to say all times, but I'm gonna be humble. A lot of times we have to surrender how we feel. We have to surrender what we feel like we shouldn't have to go through. We have to surrender our entitlement, our pain, in not a martyr to a person, but with God, and really lay at God's feet and say like, okay, God, I'm surrendering all of this. This is how I feel. I need you, right? And from that place, even if you feel broken, even if you feel shattered, God will build you up. And I think that sometimes the blame game or the self-righteous point is a low-key way to keep yourself together or like, strong in your own strength. Because if we really break all down to God and just really lay down, we don't want to feel that. You don't want to feel how that feels. You know what I mean? But God has something for you and your spouse, no matter where you fall on the cheated or didn't cheat. God has something for you. And I think we're a testimony. I got a book. She's out, and she got a book brewing in the spirit. Getting ready to be birthed out at some point in the future, and that's probably like smaller things, man. Like the things that God did in us internally that people will never know. You know what I mean? That for us to even be able to get on here and do that. So I just don't want people to miss that, because you know, they want to feel validated in their feelings, or they want to feel like yes, admit that you did it, so you can be, and I can, you know, so I can know I did nothing, or whatever the case. You know what I mean? Like we gotta look past that, get past that, and
let
get
God
to God.
vindicate you.
Yeah, let God. So yeah, that's all I got. Good.
All right. Well, it looks like we're good. Thank you all again for catching the replay. Be sure to click the channel, like, and subscribe. The video that this question was from was how to fight for your marriage when you don't trust your spouse. And so be sure to follow along in the series, and have a blessed evening.
Peace.